Today was the first of what will be a lifetime of days in prison for real estate heir Robert Durst. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murdering a friend who'd been asking too many questions about the mysterious disappearance of Durst's former wife.
In a world where wealth and power often go hand in hand, it's hard to imagine that some billionaires could be hiding dark secrets. But what if I told you that behind their luxurious lifestyles and extravagant mansions, there are billionaires who are dangerous killers? In this eye-opening exploration, we will delve into the lives of these wealthy individuals who have committed heinous crimes. Bob Ward. It was a night that would forever change the lives of Bob and Diane Ward, a wealthy couple residing in their lavish Isleworth mansion. Little did they know that their seemingly perfect life would soon be shattered by a tragic event that would thrust them into the spotlight of a high-profile murder case. On that fateful night in 2009, Diane Ward met her untimely demise, succumbing to a single gunshot wound to the head. The one responsible, none other than her own husband, Bob Ward. The chilling details of that night would send shockwaves through the community and set in motion a series of events that would ultimately lead to Bob's first conviction for second-degree murder. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that there were no witnesses to the crime other than Bob himself. In a chilling 911 call, he repeatedly confessed to shooting his wife, leaving no room for doubt about his involvement. The authorities arrived at the scene to find Diane's lifeless body, and Bob was taken into custody.
Now it's emergency.
I just shot my wife.
You just what?
I just shot my wife.
The subsequent trial captivated the nation as the public eagerly awaited the unraveling of the truth behind Diane's tragic death. The prosecution presented a compelling case painting Bob as a cold-blooded killer driven by motives yet to be fully revealed. They argued that the evidence pointed to a premeditated act, suggesting that Bob had carefully planned and executed the murder of his wife. The defense, on the other hand, sought to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. They painted a picture of a troubled marriage riddled with tension and strife. They argued that the shooting was a result of a heated argument gone awry rather than a calculated act of murder. They presented Bob as a man driven to the edge by the complexities of his relationship, ultimately leading to a tragic and irreversible mistake. After weeks of riveting courtroom drama, the jury reached a verdict. Bob Ward was found guilty of second-degree murder, and the courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions. Some celebrated the verdict as justice served, while others expressed disbelief, unable to reconcile the image of the affluent millionaire with that of a cold-blooded killer. However, the story did not end there. Bob's legal team immediately launched an appeal, challenging the conviction and seeking a new trial. They argued that crucial evidence had been overlooked and that the jury had been swayed by emotional factors rather than a fair assessment of the facts. The appeal process would prove to be a long and arduous battle as Bob fought to clear his name and prove his innocence. In the end, the appeal was successful and Bob Ward's conviction for second-degree murder was overturned. The case was far from over, though, as it would set the stage for a new trial, one that would bring even more shocking revelations to light. The nation held its breath as the legal proceedings continued, eager to uncover the truth behind the tragic events that had unfolded in the Ward mansion. After the overturning of his second-degree murder conviction, Bob Ward found himself once again facing the justice system. The nation watched with bated breath as the gripping second trial unfolded, revealing new evidence and raising questions about the true circumstances surrounding Diane Ward's tragic death. With a new legal team by his side, Bob Ward entered the courtroom prepared to fight for his freedom. The defense wasted no time in presenting a compelling case centered around a shocking piece of evidence, a suicide note allegedly left by Diane. This note, they argued, was proof that Diane was struggling with her own demons and that she had intended to take her own life on the night the fatal shot was fired. The defense team painted a picture of a troubled woman battling with personal demons that ultimately led to her tragic demise. They argued that Bob's actions were not those of a cold-blooded killer, but rather the desperate response of a husband trying to prevent his wife from ending her own life. The suicide note became a focal point of the trial, as the defense sought to convince the jury that Diane's death was a result of her own intentions, not Bob's. However, the prosecution was not swayed by the defense's arguments. They presented a strong case, highlighting the inconsistencies in Bob's version of events and questioning the authenticity of the suicide note. They argued that the evidence pointed to a different narrative, one of a man who had taken the life of his wife in a fit of rage rather than a desperate attempt to save her. As the trial progressed, the jury was faced with the difficult task task of weighing the evidence and determining Bob's guilt or innocence. After weeks of intense deliberation, they reached a verdict. Bob Ward was found guilty, not of second-degree murder as in the previous trial, but of manslaughter. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions as the gravity of the conviction sank in. The judge handed down a sentence of up to 30 years in prison, marking the end of the trial but not the end of the story. Bob's legal team immediately announced their intention to appeal the conviction, once again seeking to challenge the verdict and secure their client's freedom. The appeal process would prove to be a long and arduous battle, as Bob fought to overturn his manslaughter conviction. His defense team raised concerns about jury instructions and circumstantial evidence presented during the trial, arguing that these factors had influenced the outcome and denied Bob a fair trial. While the legal proceedings continued, Diane Ward's family stood by Bob's side, steadfast in their belief in his innocence. Paula Sayre, Diane's sister, testified in court, offering her home in Camden County, Georgia, as a place for Bob to stay if he was granted bond. Her unwavering support and willingness to put up her own house as collateral spoke volumes about the family's conviction that Bob was not the dangerous killer he had been portrayed as. John Brooks. In the quiet town of Derry, New Hampshire, a trial unfolded that would expose the dark and sinister side of millionaire John Brooks. The courtroom was filled with anticipation as the Rockingham County jury prepared to hear the shocking details of the murder-for-hire plot that took the life of Jack Reed, a local handyman. The trial began with the prosecution presenting a compelling case against Brooks. The evidence was overwhelming, and the testimonies that followed left the jury and spectators in disbelief. Two men, Joseph Vrooman and Michael Benton, took the stand and confessed to being hired by Brooks to carry out the heinous act. Vrooman, a man with a troubled past, revealed the chilling details of how he and Benton ambushed Reed in a secluded barn in Deerfield. The plan was meticulously orchestrated by Brooks himself, who wanted Reed dead at any cost. As Vrooman recounted the events, the courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Benton, a man haunted by his involvement in the crime, described the scene in the barn with chilling clarity. He hid in a closet, waiting for the moment when Reed would be pushed inside, and when that moment came, Benton unleashed a brutal attack, striking Reed repeatedly with a hammer. The brutality of the crime was unimaginable, and the jury struggled to comprehend the sheer cruelty that unfolded that fateful day. The testimonies continued, painting a vivid picture of Brooks's involvement in the murder. Vrooman revealed that he was paid a staggering $10,000 by Brooks to assist in the killing. He watched in horror as Brooks himself picked up the hammer and delivered the fatal blows to Reed's chest. The words echoed through the courtroom, "Stop the heart, stop the bleeding," a chilling reminder of the cold-blooded nature of the crime. As the testimonies unfolded, the jury and spectators were left in shock. The level of violence and premeditation displayed by Brooks was beyond comprehension. The defense attempted to argue that Brooks was merely involved in a plan to confront Reed, not kill him. However, the weight of the evidence and the powerful testimonies of Vrooman and Benton left little room for doubt. The jury, after careful deliberation, reached a verdict. John Brooks was found guilty on 2 counts of capital murder, first-degree murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions. Brooks, seemingly unaffected, maintained his stoic demeanor, while Reed's family and loved ones wept in disbelief. The conviction of John Brooks marked a significant milestone in the history of New Hampshire. He became the first person to be tried for capital murder in the state in half a century. The trial not only exposed the dark underbelly of the wealthy elite, but also highlighted the lengths some individuals would go to protect their wealth and perceived status. The conviction of John Brooks sent shockwaves through the community of Derry, New Hampshire. The town, once known for its tranquility, was now grappling with the reality that a millionaire had orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot. As the trial came to a close, the aftermath of the verdict left everyone wondering what would happen next. With the guilty verdict on 2 counts of capital murder, first-degree murder, and conspiracy to commit murder, the trial entered the penalty phase. The jury now had the weighty responsibility of determining whether John Brooks should be sentenced to death. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the next chapter of this harrowing case unfolded. The prosecution, led by Karen Huntress, presented a compelling argument for the death penalty. They highlighted the calculated nature of the crime, the brutality inflicted upon Jack Reed, and the impact it had on his family and the community. The defense, on the other hand, fought vehemently to spare Brooks's life, presenting a case centered around his troubled past and potential for rehabilitation. As the arguments were presented, the courtroom was filled with tension. The fate of John Brooks hung in the balance, and the decision would have far-reaching implications. The judge, Robert Lynn, listened intently, weighing the arguments and considering the gravity of the crime committed. To aid in their case, the defense called upon attorney David Thus of Bruck, a renowned death penalty expert. Bruck had successfully convinced a jury to spare the life of Susan Smith, a South Carolina mother who had drowned her 2 children in a car. His presence in the courtroom added another layer of intensity to an already high-stakes trial. The prosecution, however, requested a delay in the proceedings to adequately prepare prepare their rebuttal against Brooks' arguments. Huntress argued that Brooks' request essentially aimed to strike the state's entire penalty phase case, and she needed more than 24 hours to mount a strong counter-argument. The judge, Thomas Hoops, sided with the defense, allowing the hearing to proceed as scheduled. As the penalty phase continued, the courtroom was filled with emotion. Reed's family, still grappling with the loss of their loved one, hoped for justice to be served. The community, too, anxiously awaited the outcome, eager to see if the justice system would hold a millionaire accountable for his heinous actions. The jury, after careful consideration of the evidence and arguments presented, reached a decision. The fate of John Brooks was sealed. The courtroom fell into a hushed silence as the verdict was read. John Brooks would indeed sentenced to an automatic sentence of life without parole for his role in the murder-for-hire plot that claimed the life of Jack Reed. The announcement sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Brooks, who had maintained his composure throughout the trial, showed no visible reaction. Reed's family, on the other hand, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. The community, too, felt a sense of closure, knowing that a dangerous killer would face the ultimate consequence for his actions. John DuPont. John DuPont, the eccentric millionaire and heir to the DuPont fortune, lived a life of isolation and neglect. Born on November 22, 1938, he spent his early years in Lisetta Hall, his mother's grand mansion in Newton Square, Pennsylvania. However, his childhood was far from idyllic. DuPont's parents divorced when he was just 2 years old, leaving him to be raised primarily by his mother. His elder siblings, who were often away, seemed to disregard his existence, further exacerbating his feelings of loneliness. With no one to truly connect with, DuPont sought solace in the sprawling grounds of the 800-acre estate. He would spend hours wandering, immersing himself in the natural world and developing a deep fascination with animals and birds. This early fascination would later lead him to pursue a doctorate in ornithology, where he made significant contributions to the field, discovering nearly 24 bird species. DuPont's passion for wildlife also led him to establish the Delaware Museum of Natural History, leaving a lasting legacy in the scientific community. Despite his success in the scientific realm, DuPont's true passion lay in sports and athletics. During his time at the University of Miami, where he pursued a degree in biology, he not only excelled academically but also made a name for himself in the world of swimming. DuPont swam for the university's varsity teams, showcasing his athletic prowess. However, his ambitions extended beyond swimming alone. In a bid to challenge himself further, DuPont ventured into the world of pentathlon. This demanding sport, which combines 5 different disciplines including swimming, fencing, horseback riding, running and shooting, proved to be a perfect fit for his multifaceted talents. In 1965, he achieved a significant milestone by winning the Australian Championship in pentathlon, solidifying his reputation as a formidable athlete. DuPont's passion for sports extended beyond personal achievement. In 1968, he hosted the prestigious US Pentathlon Championship at his estate, which he had renamed Foxcatcher Farms. This event brought together top athletes from around the country, showcasing DuPont's dedication to promoting and supporting the sporting community. However, despite his involvement in the athletic world, DuPont's dreams of Olympic glory remained unfulfilled. On January 26, 1996, the tranquil grounds of Foxcatcher Farms were shattered by a shocking act of violence that would forever change the course of John DuPont's life. It was on this fateful day that DuPont committed a heinous crime that would thrust him into the national spotlight. Dave Schultz, a 1984 Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, had been living on the estate with his family. The exact motive behind DuPont's actions remains a mystery, but what transpired that day was nothing short of horrifying. Witnesses would later recount the chilling events that unfolded in the driveway of Schultz's home. DuPont, sporting a long, unkempt grey hair and a bushy beard, approached Schultz in his car. He rolled down the window and pointed a gun at the wrestler, asking, "Do you have a problem with me?" Without warning, DuPont opened fire, unleashing 3 bullets that pierced the air. The third shot struck Schultz in the back as he lay defenseless on the ground. The immediate aftermath of the shooting was chaotic. DuPont retreated to his mansion, barricading himself inside and holding police sharpshooters at bay for 2 days. Refusing to surrender, he repeatedly requested his lawyer, making over 100 pleas for legal representation during this time. The standoff gripped the nation as the wealthy heir seemed to believe he could evade the consequences of his actions.
The standoff between a SWAT team and the heir to a fortune continues tonight. Police say John DuPont shot Olympic wrestling great Dave Schultz last night. Now he's facing off with police as they try to negotiate an end to that standoff.
Eventually, law enforcement was able to apprehend DuPont, bringing an end to the tense standoff. The shocking murder of Dave Schultz had sent shockwaves through the wrestling community and beyond. The nation was left reeling, grappling with the senseless violence that had unfolded on the picturesque estate. In the subsequent trial, the defense presented a case centered around DuPont's mental state. Witnesses, including a number of psychiatrists, testified to his bizarre and delusional behavior in recent years. DuPont's paranoia had led him to install razor wire in the walls and attic of his house, convinced that intruders were out to get him. He had even referred to himself by grandiose titles such as the Dalai Lama and Christ Child. While the defense argued that DuPont's actions were driven by an irrational fear and a belief in a conspiracy against him, the prosecution painted a different picture. Lead prosecutor Joseph McGettigan acknowledged DuPont's mental illness, but portrayed him as a wealthy and arrogant man who had grown increasingly angry with Schultz in the year leading up to the shooting. McGettigan argued that DuPont believed he could commit murder and escape the consequences. After 7 days of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict on February 26, 1997. DuPont was found guilty of third-degree murder, a conviction that carried a maximum prison term of 40 years. However, the jury also ruled that he was mentally ill, sparing him a possible life sentence. This compromise verdict meant that DuPont would receive psychiatric treatment, but would serve his entire sentence in a prison or mental hospital. The shocking murder of Dave Schultz and the subsequent trial had captivated the nation. It brought to light the dark underbelly of wealth and privilege, as well as the complexities of mental illness and its impact on criminal responsibility. Phil Spector. In the vibrant music scene of the 1960s, one name stood out among the rest: Phil Spector. Born on December 26, 1939, in the Bronx, New York, Spector would go on to become one of the most influential record producers and songwriters of his time. His innovative recording practices and the iconic wall of sound production style would forever change the landscape of popular music. Spector's career began to flourish in the late 1950s when he joined the legendary record label Atlantic Records. It was here that he honed his skills as a producer, working with artists like the Drifters and Ben E. King, but it was his collaboration with girl groups that would truly cement his place in music history. In 1961, Spector formed his own record label, Phillies Records, and began working with talented acts like the Ronettes and the Crystals. With his meticulous attention to detail and his ability to create a rich and layered sound, Spector produced timeless hits that would define an era. Songs like Be My Baby by the Ronettes and Da Do Ron Ron by the Crystals became instant classics, showcasing Spector's unique production style and his ability to capture the essence of the artists he worked with. But it wasn't just girl groups that Spector collaborated with. His talent and reputation attracted some of the biggest names in the industry. In 1970, Spector teamed up with the legendary Beatles to produce their final studio album, Let It Be. His contributions to the album, including the iconic orchestral arrangement on the title track, showcased his versatility as a producer and his ability to bring out the best in any artist. Spector's success continued into the 1970s as he worked with renowned musicians like John Lennon and George Harrison on their solo records. His collaboration with Lennon on the critically acclaimed album Imagine further solidified his reputation as a musical genius. However, as the 1970s progressed, Spector's career took a downturn. He became increasingly reclusive and struggled to replicate the success of his earlier years. Despite his undeniable talent, personal and professional challenges began to overshadow his once shining career. As the 1970s gave way to the new millennium, Phil Spector's life took a dark and tragic turn. The once celebrated music producer found himself entangled in a web of controversy and legal troubles that would ultimately lead to his downfall. It was on the fateful night of February 3, 2003, that the life of actress Lana Clarkson was tragically cut short. Clarkson, known for her roles in films like Barbarian Queen, crossed paths with Spector at the House of Blues Club on Los Angeles' Sunset Strip. Little did she know that this encounter would be her last. Spector invited Clarkson to his mansion in Alhambra, California, and the pair were driven there by his driver, Adriano de Souza. In the early hours of the morning, de Souza heard a noise from inside the mansion. Moments later, Spector opened the door, holding a gun in his hand, and uttered the chilling words, "I think I killed somebody." The police were called to the scene, and they discovered Lana Clarkson's lifeless body slumped in a chair, a single gunshot wound to her mouth. The shocking and gruesome nature of the crime sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the world. Spector was arrested and initially claimed that the gun had gone off accidentally. However, as the investigation unfolded, a different narrative emerged. The evidence presented during Spector's televised trial in 2007 painted a damning picture. His defense team argued that there was no physical evidence linking him to the murder. They pointed out the absence of fingerprints and DNA on the gun and the lack of gunshot residue on Spector himself. However, the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict, leading to a retrial in 2008. During the retrial, the prosecution presented a compelling case against Spector. They argued that the evidence, including witness testimonies and forensic analysis pointed to Spector as the perpetrator. The jury ultimately found him guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison.
The jury in the above entitled action find the defendant, Philip Spector, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder of Lana Clarkson in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony, as charged in count 1 of the indictment.
Spector's conviction marked the end of an era for the music industry and sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. The once revered musical genius had become a convicted killer, forever tarnishing his legacy. While Spector maintained his innocence throughout his time in prison, his attempts to appeal the conviction were unsuccessful. He spent his final years behind bars, battling health issues and the consequences of his actions. In January 2021, Phil Spector passed away in prison at the age of 81, leaving behind a legacy marred by tragedy and violence. The case of Phil Spector serves as a chilling reminder that fame and success do not exempt individuals from the consequences of their actions. It is a cautionary tale of how one man's downfall can overshadow a lifetime of achievements. The story of Phil Spector's conviction for the murder of Lana Clarkson will forever be etched in the annals of true crime history. In conclusion, the story of Phil Spector is a chilling reminder of the dark side that can lurk behind the glamorous facade of fame and success. From his rise as a musical genius, revolutionizing the industry with his innovative wall of sound production technique, to his tragic downfall and conviction for the murder of Lana Clarkson, Spector's life took a dramatic turn. Despite his undeniable talent and contributions to music, Spector's legacy will forever be overshadowed by the shocking events that led to his imprisonment. The story of his conviction serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that wealth and influence do not exempt individuals from the consequences of their actions. As we delve into the lives of billionaires, it is important to remember that behind the glitz and glamour, there may be dark secrets and dangerous tendencies. Robert Durst. This is a view into the enigmatic life of Robert Durst, a man whose name became synonymous with wealth, power, and chilling secrets. Our story begins with Durst's early life and his ill-fated marriage to Kathleen McCormack. Born into a wealthy family in New York City in 1943, Robert Durst grew up in the lap of luxury. His father, Seymour Durst, was a prominent real estate magnate, and young Robert seemed destined for a life of privilege. However, as we will soon discover, his path took a much darker turn. In 1973, Robert Durst married Kathleen McCormack, a dental hygienist known as Kathy, to her friends and family. At first, their marriage appeared to be a union of love and happiness, but as time went on, cracks began to form in their relationship. By 1980, the couple had separated, though they never formally divorced. During this tumultuous period, Robert Durst started dating Prudence Farrow, the sister of famous actress Mia Farrow, and the inspiration behind the Beatles' song Dear Prudence. The relationship between Durst and Prudence raised eyebrows, but it was just the beginning of the strange and unsettling events that would follow. On January 31st, 1982, tragedy struck. Kathy McCormack attended a party in Newtown, Connecticut, hosted by her friend Gilbert Najami. That night, Kathy received an angry phone call from her estranged husband. Distressed and visibly upset, she confided in Gilbert, expressing her fear of what Robert might do to her. Little did anyone know that these would be the last words Kathy would ever speak. When Kathy returned to the couple's South Salem, New York cottage that evening, an argument ensued between her and Robert. According to Durst's account, he drove Kathy to the train station and she headed back into Manhattan. But 5 days later, Durst contacted the police to report Kathy missing. The investigation into Kathy's disappearance initially treated it as a missing persons case. However, as time went on, suspicions grew and the focus shifted towards Robert Durst. Rumors swirled that he had something to do with his wife's vanishing act, but without concrete evidence, justice remained elusive. In 2000, Westchester County investigators reopened the case, now considering it a potential murder. The following year, Kathy was declared legally dead despite her body never being found. The search for answers intensified, and the spotlight turned to Susan Berman, a close friend of Durst. Tragically, just days before she was scheduled to speak with investigators, Susan Berman was found dead in her Los Angeles home. She had been fatally shot in the back of her head. Berman's family and friends, who once believed Durst would never harm her, were left in shock and disbelief. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, and the web of deceit surrounding Robert Durst was beginning to unravel. In October 2001, the spotlight turned to Galveston, Texas, where Durst's life took another sinister turn. He was arrested for the murder of his 71-year-old neighbor, Morris Black, whose dismembered body was discovered. Durst's defense claimed self-defense, but the details that emerged during the trial painted a disturbing picture. During the trial, it was revealed that Durst had rented an apartment in Galveston under an assumed identity, posing as a mute woman named Dorothy. Witnesses testified to seeing Durst dressed in women's clothing, further adding to the intrigue surrounding his bizarre behavior. Shockingly, the jury acquitted Durst of murder, leaving many stunned and perplexed. Years later, in 2010, 2010, Durst's case received renewed attention with the release of the movie All Good Things, a fictionalized account of his life starring Ryan Gosling. Durst reached out to the film's director, sparking a series of events that would thrust him back into the public eye. In 2014, Durst found himself in trouble once again, this time in Houston, Texas. He was arrested for exposing himself and urinating on a candy display at a CVS pharmacy. Although seemingly unrelated to his previous crimes, this incident further cemented Durst's reputation as a man with a penchant for bizarre and disturbing behavior. The life and deaths of Robert Durst in 2015 that would prove to be the turning point in Durst's life. The six-part series delved deep into Durst's past, shedding light on the mysteries surrounding his alleged crimes. In a shocking twist during the filming of The Jinx, Durst made several damning statements that would come back to haunt him. In an unguarded moment, while unaware that his microphone was still recording, Durst muttered the chilling words, "I killed them all, of course." This stunning confession sent shockwaves through the true crime community and led to his subsequent arrest. In March 2015, Durst was apprehended by FBI agents at a New Orleans hotel just a day before the final episode of The Jinx aired. The Los Angeles District Attorney charged him with first-degree murder in the death of Susan Berman, with additional allegations of lying in wait and gun use.
Just moments ago, in fact, so going into today, Robert Durst, who is a very frail 78-year-old, faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. And today his team, before this was read, they tried to get a new trial, but just within the last hour, the judge denied the defense's motion for a new trial.
During his trial, the jury was presented with the damning evidence, including Durst's confession caught on tape. In September 2021, after years of legal battles and delays, a Los Angeles jury convicted Durst of Berman's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, in January 2022, Durst died as a prisoner in Stockton, California at the age of 78. As we reflect on the stories of these billionaires turned killers, we are left with a sense of disbelief and a deeper understanding of the depths of darkness that can exist within the world of the ultra-wealthy. These cases remind us that justice must prevail, regardless of one's social status or financial power. For more content like this, click on the videos showing on your screen now.